So we'll go ahead and get started, and just wanted to welcome you all. Thanks for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to come be part of this process and to learn more about Project Anchorage, and that's what we're here for, is to share, where we're at in the process, the timeline going forward, and at the end, hopefully answer your questions. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Randy Solt. I'm the Assembly Member representing South Anchorage District 6.
And hi everyone, my name is Felix Rivera, and I am the Assembly Member representing Midtown District 4, and first got elected in 2017, so I've been around for a little bit. So I want to briefly go through our agenda for today. So we have a presentation that we're going to try to keep pretty brief, and it'll be maximum 30 minutes, but hopefully shorter than that. And then we want to do a Q&A session, just to make sure that we hear from everyone. We are going to ask folks to limit their time to 3 minutes, and we'll have a timer on the screen so you can see exactly what your time is at. And then Randy and I will have some closing comments.
Okay, I just want to point out, when y'all walked in, there was a sign-up table, not mandatory, but appreciative. We also have frequently asked questions for Project Anchorage, a card on final public testimony options, so please take a look at that, and then some copies of the SA version of the ordinance, and you can feel free to take those. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll be handing out feedback forms, so I encourage you to stay so you can provide us feedback that you may not have been able to get or may not have wanted to get us verbally. And we'll be here for that part of the meeting. Thank you.
All right, without further ado, we'll get started with our presentation.
So, want to go back to where we started this process. So this was in the works for several years through AEDC, Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. And it's modeled after Oklahoma City. So about 30 years ago, Oklahoma City was on desperate times, and they put all their eggs in one basket to win a large contract. I can't remember what it was, but FedEx or Boeing or something like that. And unbeknownst to them, the company that was looking to build in Oklahoma City or the other cities sent employees out to the city to see if this was a place they wanted to live and work. And the feedback was that they did everything very, very well in the proposal, and probably had the best proposal, best economic incentives. However, the town was basically a place that no one wanted to live. It was built for cars, not people, and rated very poorly, and they lost. At that time, the city had to do something different, and so they initiated a 1% for sale, 1% for municipal projects, maps, very similar. And with that, they also had, I believe, a 7-year expiration term. They've voted it back in 4 times because it's been successful. I won't get everything right, but they've built a rafting park and have held Olympic trials there. They, I think, did a fairly gutsy move and built a stadium for a basketball team that they didn't have, and now they have the Oklahoma City Thunder. So there's a lot of, and I haven't been to Oklahoma City in a while, but ADC's been there twice, and a lot of great feedback. So we tried to mirror, seeing that we were a similar size to what they were back then. We felt we had some similar issues. I think they're in much worse shape because we did have Project 80s that helped improve our city back then, but we kind of need to reinvest in ourselves. So what we're looking at is revitalizing Anchorage through dedicated capital projects, providing property tax relief or diversification. Right now, that's pretty much our single source of revenue, and diversifying our tax base. One thing I'll touch on later with the projects, but really it's around investing in ourselves. And roughly 20% of the tax would come from tourists. The percentage that would come from those that live in the valley or residents that don't live in the municipality or Alaska residents, that's really hard for us to estimate. So we expect that number to be higher.
So I just want to note for folks in the room that this is a town hall that's being put forward by Randy and I, but we'll note that we were just joined by Anna Brawley, West Anchorage Assembly member. She's sitting in the audience if you all want to chat with her later. A little bit of sort of where I came to this conversation and how I got involved. So for me, I was interested, this would have been some years ago, like in 2022, I was interested in having conversations with the then mayor about doing some type of sales tax initiative that was a 2% sales tax, one of it going towards property tax relief and 1% going towards some kind of identified municipal priorities, whether that's, for me, the priorities that I wanted to highlight were public transit. Folks who know me know that I have been a huge advocate of public transit and continue to be. And then things like housing and other critical municipal priorities. I think for me, I got engaged in that way, learned that at the time there was an interest from that particular administration in moving forward with any kind of proposal as I imagined it, and then eventually got brought into what AEDC has been envisioning. And the reason that I have put my name on this proposal and continue to be a supporter of this proposal mirrors a lot of what I think Randy has talked about. We are in pretty dire straits as a community in terms of the way that I put it in recent op-eds, we're a little bit stuck. We aren't growing in the ways that we used to be. We aren't increasing population in the ways that we used to be. More people are leaving than are coming into our town. And I think that's not a place that any city wants to be in. So what this measure to me does is it allows us to really control our own fate as a community and say we are going to invest in ourselves. And when we invest in ourselves and say we are worth revitalizing, that we are worth creating the city, which essentially that's what the MAPS projects is, creating the city that increases our quality of life, that people want to stay in, people want to move to, that will spur more good things to happen in our community. It's sort of this revitalization concept that a lot of communities focus primarily in their downtowns, right? Let's revitalize downtown and then revitalize, that'll help spur development to revitalize the entire city. Well, this is really saying, yes, some of these projects focus on downtown, but we're going to revitalize the entire municipality and focus on projects throughout the municipality. So those are some of the things that really got me interested in this as a concept. And then understanding that this is a possible phase one. There are, just like Oklahoma City did, they did phases 2, 3, and now I think they're on 4. So what could 2, 3, and 4 look like? Could the original idea that I had in 2022 around public transportation, around housing, and all these other key municipal priorities, could that be 2, 3, and 4? So that's, I think, what brings me here, what keeps me here.
Okay, I'm just going to walk through some of the community engagement process by the Project Anchorage Coalition, which was really the basis of that, started with the AEDC, Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. So May 2024, conducted public opinion research on what type of sales tax that Anchorage voters would be willing to pay for. And that and the Oklahoma City model is kind of the genesis and the baseline. The other baseline was we've had several past sales tax initiatives, and so we reviewed that legislation as well as legislation from other communities to see how best to enact this. We're trying not to reinvent the wheel, trying to learn from others' successes and their mistakes. June 2024 launched a 3-month public conversation, engaged with 100+ community groups, attending meetings, hosted listening sessions, informing of project ideas and the process throughout the summer and fall. Invested in media to spread the word across all of Anchorage. Collected, I think over a 3-month period, about 300+ project ideas from the residents. And then had another period where they solicited feedback on those ideas, trying to hone down to what was the initial list, which has been revised to what you currently see in the ordinance. All in all, they donated, businesses and personal investors, I think it was about $150,000 to conduct that initial research to help get this project off the ground. And one of the big pieces, like Oklahoma City, is we tried to crowdsource the project. So it's not what we think should be done, it's what the community is coming to us and telling us. Like all processes, it could have gone on longer. I'm sure we can always do better. And the idea that we'll talk about when we go through the section is there's a living mechanism to bring forward projects, prioritize projects. And so we have this list, but we're not necessarily stuck with this list.
So that was the community engagement process by the Project Anchorage Coalition, and that was in the spring, summer of last year. Then the assembly process began, and that really started in August and continues to this day. So August 16th was the first work session led by AEDC on behalf of Project Anchorage Coalition, where they gave a high-level summary of what Project Anchorage is and what it could do. Then from there, we had a variety of other work sessions. Project Anchorage was formally introduced, the original version, on October 22nd. And then we had a few different times throughout this process that you'll see on the slides where the Alaska Black Caucus did invite us to have a variety of community conversations, and so one of those did happen in October. In November of last year, we had our first public hearing, and then we had another work session to talk about the projects, because at that point, the 10 initial projects were released. The Project Anchorage Coalition had done all their analysis, and so we got a chance to look at that. In December of last year, we had another work session to talk about different versions, different amendments, try to get a pulse of where the assembly is, because in the end, in order for something to go on the ballot, that is a charter change, which we'll talk a little bit about the language here soon, but that requires 8 votes of the assembly to put something on the ballot that's a charter change. So we've been having those conversations with the assembly. The community groups also held a work session with the assembly to discuss their concerns and present some recommendations. And then at the end of December, before everyone took their holiday break, 5 different versions of the sales tax were put out there as conversation pieces. In January, the assembly, an assembly sponsor, myself, answered questions at another Alaska Black Caucus community conversation where Project Anchorage was brought up. We had a second public hearing, and then a special committee was formed and had one meeting to try to negotiate differences between 2 of the different versions, the S and the S2A versions. Those versions no longer, they're all part of the public record, but those versions are no longer before the body. The only version that's before the body is the SA version. So last month, we had a final draft version, the SA version, which is the only existing version, was released. Assembly sponsors had a final work session with the Assembly to review the SA version and talk about all of our next steps. And then there was one final Alaska Black Caucus community conversation on Project Anchorage, which was this last Sunday. Yesterday, we had our 3rd public hearing. And then I just want to note that October through today, on Monday, we had our latest meeting. Randy and I have had a variety of different private meetings with concerned community groups to address a lot of their concerns, and that's been something that we've been open to having those conversations in those meetings to see what we can do to better the proposal. So a lot of that has been happening, just so everyone is aware.
Okay, so I'm gonna hop up because I like the projects and I like moving around. So again, all the projects came from the community. AEC ran that portion. Plus there was feedback through this whole process. What the original AO looked like to what it looks like now is pretty much night and day. So I talked about 300 submissions that came through. Then there was a project organization committee, and there were two committees. One was around costing, trying to get rough, like 10% P10s estimates for the project, so we knew roughly how many projects we could fit in based on the estimates for the amount of revenue that would be collected. The other group was responsible for trying to group projects together, because a lot of them were very similar, a lot of them had common themes, so we could find similar factors or features or location, as well as they ran the feedback loop to get us to that 10 list. I think it originally came down like 20 and then slowly got narrowed down to 10. And that was part of the public opinion survey to help us get to that point. And I got to talk about the costing rate. So the projects, so this is the final project list, but at the same time, there's going to be an oversight board. The Citizen Oversight Committee will prioritize and make recommendations to the Assembly on the order in which projects are funded to move forward. They can also make recommendations of new projects that, again, are crowdsourced to come forward, that fit into Project Anchorage. We have the revenue, and if approved by the Assembly, would then go in this process. Obviously, we have to balance the number of projects, the cost of projects, and the revenue that's collected. Some of the things that were on here, we did have emergency vehicles and snow vehicles. We pulled that one out because there was going to be a levy on the ballot. We also had a project around Westchester Lagoon, and feedback from the community was they weren't in favor of that project, so that was also pulled out. We added 3, 10, and part of 7, again, looking to increase housing in the area, and so that was important. We kept getting that feedback. So one is built around the National Archives site. The other was around Chester Creek Sport Complex, which I don't believe it's floating around it, but there's some visualization, some concepts around Chester Creek revitalizing that. Now that is parkland, so in order to use parkland for another feature, other parkland have to go to a vote. But also, eventually, we expect the Ford dealership lot to come forward, and that may be included in that project. Now the goal is not to compete with private enterprise. So along the housing line, we will help facilitate this. It may mean bringing in water, sewer, electricity to lots to help improve the lot to get it ready for development. But then that would follow the normal RFP process with the municipality to build and construct each of these projects. We also added 10. So there was a lot of feedback, and I was probably the most resistant, actually, because I wanted this to go to new projects. I didn't want it to be a revenue source that would go to funding current municipal activities that our property tax should be funding. But I gave it on that because we also have a lot of aging infrastructure that needs to be taken care of. And that kind of fits into the capital approach of the project, is let's take projects that facilities we currently own and try to fix them, enhance them, again, make them better served for us. One thing that we're doing, and if I can find it on here, Downtown Arts and Redevelopment Center. So one of the pieces of that project is when we built the PAC in Eden, we didn't include a mechanism for the operating cost. So with each of these projects, the operating cost for the life of the project is built into a fund. But we want to have, in a way, the party, but we don't want to have the headache like we did with the Egan Center and the PAC. So the Egan Center headache was fixed when we built the Denina Center. That operating cost was pulled into the Denina Center. So with that project, we plan on pulling the PAC cost into that to make the PAC a little more sustainable so they can survive the ups and downs.
so now these next few slides are going to get into the actual ordinance itself, AO 2024-105 SA. We're going to go section by section. As Randy stated earlier, if anyone's interested in reading the ordinance, there are, I don't know if there are any copies left, but there were copies at the front table. But all of this document is available on the Assembly website if folks didn't get a chance to get a copy today. So, section by section, try to do this quick for you all. So section 1 just simply states that the language in section 2, which is the actual ballot proposition language, is going to be placed on the special election ballot of September 2nd, 2025. Section 2 is the actual ballot proposition language. It starts with a broad explanation of the proposal, which folks are probably aware that 3% sales tax, 2%, 1%, 2% for property tax relief, 1% for MAPS. Then it goes through the charter change language to implement Project Anchorage, and then it amends the Bill of Rights in the charter, which is something that we have done for the several previous proposals that have been sales tax related, like the alcohol tax and the marijuana tax, to conform with the majority vote, which is the constitutional way for us to do this. Then section 3, that is the hefty part of the ordinance. That is the ordinance language which implements Project Anchorage itself. So there's really two pieces to this. What ballot language goes to the voters for approval, and then how is it implemented in municipal code? It's very technical language. If you've spent any time looking at municipal code and looking at the alcohol tax, marijuana tax, any part of code, it's all very technical, bureaucratic language, but I'll try to go through some parts of it so folks are informed. So first part is 12.80.060. That gets to what Randy was talking a little bit earlier about, which is the MAPS Oversight Board to do the really detail-oriented work to make recommendations on moving the projects forward. Because the projects that are on the ballot, they're not in any specific order. It's just 10 non-prioritized projects. And so this oversight board would provide recommendations on the order of the projects to get done based on feasibility, design, costs, a whole slew of factors that that board will look at. And then adding any new projects, this ordinance envisions that would start with the MAPS oversight board, and then they would provide recommendations to both the mayor and the assembly on any possible new projects. That say we are able to fund all 9 of the projects, plus do some work with existing projects. If there's extra money, then that's money for new projects, and so that's where this process would kick in. 12.80.070 talks about exemptions, and listed on the slide are a variety of the exemptions. So there's been a couple of analysis that have been done by UAA, the Center for Economic Development, CED, and the most recent analysis of this particular version came out last week or the week before. And long and short of it, they did an analysis of if you are in the bottom 10% of income by household, and if you are in the top 10% of income by household, what do these exemptions do in terms of reducing regressivity? So for the bottom 10% of households by income, these exemptions are essentially will cover 60% of your annual spending. So 60% of your goods that you purchase will not be taxed by this sales tax. If you look at the top 10% of households by income, that number goes down to 38%. So 38% of your annual expenditures would not be taxed by the sales tax according to the exemptions as we have them listed. I think it's important to note that there is the ability to modify exemptions, to add exemptions or change exemptions if there is a particular issue with an exemption. It's not doing exactly what we wanted it to do. So that is an ability that will, that always exists. Then what we wanted to do, and I maybe should have included this chart in here, but I didn't. So there's a chart that the UAA CED analysis had that basically shows the percent by decile, so top 10% to bottom 10% of household income, so all of those deciles in between, how much of your total annual income would be used up by a sales tax. And what that analysis showed is that the bottom 2 deciles would be the most negatively impacted, in that all of the remaining deciles would be fairly evenly impacted. So the graph was 2 really big charts at the top, and then the rest were all pretty much the same. So in order to address that reversibility, the household exemption was created. It's currently set at 80% of federal poverty level, which does cover that bottom 2 deciles. But that is something, because it is an ordinance, it's always a point of conversation for future changes should the assembly decide they want to come back and increase that household exemption. I should also note that there is no planned implementation for the household exemption in code. That's one of those pieces where we're going to have to come back, should the voters approve it, and decide how we're going to do this. The UAA Center for Economic Development Analysis did do a side-by-side comparison of what would it look like to just do an exemption and just from the front end exempt, or from the back end do a credit system. And so there has been some initial analysis of what it might look like to implement a household exemption, but that's a sort of a to be determined issue. Section 4, so that's the biggest section if you look at the ordinance. That's a lot of interesting information if you really like reading municipal code. So section 4 is all about protection of the tax cap. So making sure that this sales tax will not negatively impact our tax cap. And section 5 is about increasing of the business personal property tax to provide assistance really to small and medium-sized businesses, but all businesses will be able to benefit. So the current business personal property tax is set at $20,000, and this would increase that to $250,000.
Okay, so section 6, pretty straightforward. It just basically states that section 2, 3, and 5 is what we published on the election website and be accessible at the voter center and the election center. Section 7 was added because one of the compromises that was made is marijuana and alcohol were added as an exemption. So it was our intent that they be included. So since we did not include them, we just wanted to communicate that intent to the next assembly members should they want to bring this forward again after a successful 7 years if it passed. And if someone wants to bring it forward again because it was successful, that it was our intent that at that time you would include marijuana and alcohol. Now it's like a resolution, so it's a strongly worded letter. Whether they pay attention to it or not, it's just saying, hey, 7, 8 years ago, this is how we felt. You may be in a completely different space. Section 8 was a resolution that was passed, I think sometime in February, January, that basically set a special election for Project Anchorage, because it was becoming apparent we weren't going to make the April election of this year. And then Section 9, again, if this gets approved, this will change charter and code and be formally adopted on October 1st, 2025.
All right, so a little bit on the assembly process from here. So obviously we're all here at this town hall, and thank everyone for being here. There's going to be a second town hall on March 8th. That's this Saturday at 4 p.m. at the Mountain View Library in the community room. Then on Friday, March 14th, there will be a publication of the amendment packet, and you'll be able to find that amendment packet at uni.org/Project Anchorage. So just stick on that for a little bit. There are at least 2 amendments that Randy and I are working on. One of them, just based off our understanding of, again, going back to this needs 8 votes to get on the ballot, our understanding of what some of our colleagues are looking for with this proposal is a greater balance between property tax relief and municipal investments. And so what several proposals of the former proposals, the S2, S2A, those proposals talked about a 50-50 split. 50% for property tax relief, 50% for municipal investments. And so that is one of the amendments that will be brought forward, is to make that rather than a 1/3, 2/3, 50-50. And then there's another amendment that we're working on to deal with some suggestions that Foraker had dealing with nonprofits. And we've already included some of the Foraker amendments into the proposal, and we'll look at continuing to have those conversations with them. And there's actually another possible amendment, just want to be fully transparent, that might amend some of the language in section 7, just to make it super clear that that section talks about the policy intent of the current assembly, not the policy intent of any future assembly, and that any policy intent that we set is not automatic for any future assemblies. So that language is something that we are working on, because community groups have reached out to us, and we're trying to be responsive. There are some other amendments that I understand may or may not be brought forward by members Zolotel and Brawley, but overall intent is that all of these amendments be put forward into an amendment package that everyone will be able to look at starting March 14th. And then March 18th will be the final public hearing, debate, and vote. And it's my intent that we put the issue to bed on March 18th, whether they're going to vote to put it on the ballot or not. So there are a few opportunities to weigh in, and as Randy showed in that little quarter-sized sheet, if you want to take a copy of that, hopefully there are still some over there, so you can take that home with you. But there are 3 opportunities. First is to email us, and you can do that right now if you wanted to while you're sitting here, and up until the moment that we vote. I know I check my email during assembly meetings actively. So that's assembly@anchorageak.gov. Then if you're interested in participating over the phone, there is the opportunity to sign up by 5 p.m. on Monday, March 17th. And that it's an online form that you have to fill out, and that is at anchgov.info/testify. The printed sheets, I think, have a slightly different website. I didn't know about this website until after those were printed. They should all point you in the same direction, though. And then in person, if you want to come to the assembly chambers here at the LUSAC, I would get there by 6 p.m. because 6 p.m. is when that's the earliest that we can start any public hearings. And I can't promise it'll be right at 6 p.m., but it'll be at some point after 6 p.m. And it's a first come, first serve. So you don't have to sign up on a list or anything. Just show up, and the chair will say, public testimony is now open, and then you'll come and testify if you would like. And I think that takes us to Q&A. So just a quick reminder. This is going to be 3 minutes. We're going to give you all the courtesy of 5 to 10 seconds to finish your thoughts, but please keep it to that 3 minutes. And then you can ask questions if you want to, and we'll do our best to respond, or if we don't have all of the information or are not able to respond right now, we'll definitely do some follow-up. And if you don't want to ask any questions, that's also something you can do. You can just provide your testimony if you would like. The mic for anyone interested in participating is over there. So if anyone wants to participate, I'm gonna see if this works. Oh, cool, it does work. Let me just make sure. Oh, no. Oh. Oh, technology. No, because it has to default. This part. Okay. Great. So, sorry, technology. I should have prepped this in advance, but I'm gonna put my timer on the phone. And yeah, you don't have to take 3 minutes, but okay, welcome.
Hello. Hi, I'm John Henninger. Just a couple questions around the idea that sales taxes are inherently regressive. The first is I appreciate that it's hard to differentiate between valley folks or other people living nearby versus residents, but do you have a rough percentage for like just non-residents versus residents? And the second question is in terms of the amount of revenue coming in from the sales tax. And then the second question is I appreciate the section on the low-income household exemption being vague, but it would be nice, I guess this is more of a comment, it would be nice if there was some language in there about outreach, and whatever solution actually happens, it should be easy, transparent, and well advertised. And it would be nice to have some language in there to kind of make sure that happens. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So with regard to the total amount, it's projected that the sales tax will, during its lifespan, collect approximately 180 million. There are some more conservative estimates that are a little bit lower than that at the 160 million range. But so between 160 and 180 million, if you sort of half and half that, going back to the amendment that I spoke about, that's how much would go towards property tax relief and how much would go towards municipal investments. And then I'll look up the numbers, because I know there are some numbers out there on residents versus non-residents. There are some estimates, so I'll look those up and I'll talk about those in a minute.
If I was conducting this and had a hearing and had to go back and report that there were 28 white people, 1 native, and 1 black person, I would, no Sudanese, no Samoans, no Filipinos in the room. I would have to go back and say to whoever sent me out here, I'm afraid I don't have a representative sampling of what this all-American city is. You guys both know how regressive to poor folks this is. You know that. I've heard you in past occasions say that. So it baffles me why, when most of the other assembly people have given up on this notion, that you guys are still pushing it. It baffles me. I just can't even believe that this is still something that we're talking about. Capturing money from commuters. Folks driving in from Wasilla, making money off Anchorage. I'd wait till I get back to Wasilla and go to Three Bears or somewhere and buy what I was going to buy without paying a sales tax in the Anchorage. If I had the resources, I would order or have my daughter send me whatever I wanted to buy and escape it. But folks such as me, who've been here since 1965, paying property taxes since 1970, living in a house that I moved into in 1980 that is falling off code, falling down, just put a new roof on last summer, need upgrades on every in this rush to try and attract new people. I just don't see it. I don't understand it. I'm disappointed. I'm disgusted. I'm mad. I'm angry. All kinds of emotions are occurring over this 3% sales tax. And you mentioned that there were 300 projects that were proposed, and somebody leaned them down to what these projects are. I'd love to see what the full 300 projects were proposed. Very few of them were to keep us old folks still here. I suppose we're just supposed to die and move off, and then a fourplex go up on where I'm living now, and that would bring in more tax, because old cow is getting the old folks exemption, and we need new blood and new money.
I don't think anyone wants to die off, and so we do appreciate your feedback. I think the big thing here is we're trying to limit regressivity, so I hear you on that. We're trying to make it as public a process as we can, get as much feedback as we can, but we're also trying to bring solutions. And so I look forward to the other assembly members to bring forward solutions, but we haven't seen any. So I'm just personally, I'm not the kind of person that can sit back and do nothing. I'm not saying that this is the holy grail of solutions or the right solution, but we're trying. Thank you.
And actually, sorry, just really briefly. Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Cal. In terms of the why Randy and I are still pushing this, I think I want folks to be careful how they interpret why those other versions were taken out. I don't necessarily know if those other versions were taken out because assembly members don't support the sales tax anymore. So I think a lot of those versions were put forward, based on my understandings, to show the community what different versions might look like, to have conversations, and then to hopefully have those ideas incorporated into a final version. And I think Randy and I have done a good job of incorporating several of the ideas into a final version. On regressivity, I really do appreciate, Cal, that you have been consistent on this. And I have talked in the past about how sales taxes are regressive, and that we should do everything we can to reduce regressivity. And I think to a large degree we have done a significant amount to reduce regressivity, more than probably any other existing sales tax in Alaska to reduce regressivity. I will also say, and I don't want to make this like a point of contention, but this is certainly an interesting discussion to have for the future, that property taxes are also regressive. And that tends to be something that isn't a part of the conversation a lot. And I would love to bring that into the conversation at some point in the future about how a property tax system is also a regressive system. And it's unfortunate that local governments, the tax bases that we have, the levers that we have to pull for taxes, are all primarily regressive taxes. Because income tax, that's something that is at the state level, and the state doesn't want to implement an income tax for whatever reason. So yeah, appreciate that.
My question was just kind of like, what about the renters? And I'm just thinking of, I know of people who are out of state who own multiple properties, and obviously they're not going to pass on their savings to their tenants. I know of, a single parent home where they're being evicted because their landlord's turning their home into an Airbnb. And I know that's not what we're addressing here, but none of this economic benefit is going to be passed along to those people. And so, it's really going to be those people who are hit hardest by it. And, you talked about prepared food and people, use prepared food when they're really busy going from job to job. And then the other thing, this was actually something that, I just want to know about the renters and how this is going to impact them, because I think they're going to be more affected than anybody else. It seems like this would be beneficial, the property taxing would be beneficial to people who maybe don't need that extra help. So that was my question/comment.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't know that. Thank you. So, yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I am a renter, and I think, the only renter on the Anchorage Assembly. And so, you might be thinking, well, why the hell are you supporting this if you're a renter and you care about regressivity and all these issues? But, here's what I know won't happen. I know, and this is just Felix's opinion, I know that rents aren't going to go down. That's not going to happen. What I hope happens, and I can only use the word hope because that's all I got for now, is that rents will no longer go up at the pace that they have been going up. What I would like to turn that hope into reality is to get commitments from our large landlords in writing from them. If Project Anchorage passes, you will reduce your rate of increases to rents. That's what I would like to do. But that is not something that is a conversation for the proposal for the assembly, but it's something that I will definitely, if this gets on the ballot, will be working on actively.
Yeah, and I'll just say briefly, I know that if there's a property tax increase, it will get passed on. And we looked at various methods trying to segregate the property tax to residents only, to renters only, to exclude businesses, to exclude out-of-state businesses. We couldn't find a legal pathway to make that happen. Now, I know Representative Ray, I believe, is working on something that may make that an avenue if that gets through, but it's not a tool that we have available to us right now.
Hello, my name is John Levy, and I live in District 6, and I want to thank you both for, you really care about the issue in our community, and you're looking for ways to keep us as a vibrant community. I have a couple of questions. The first one is getting back to the premise, and you talked about Oklahoma City, and I don't understand how you came up, how you came up with the statistics on why people aren't staying. It seems like that would be a comprehensive kind of survey of people that are moving out, or somehow people that, businesses that thought about coming here and didn't, and what reasons that, they decided to move or not to stay. I've lived here my entire life, almost 70 years, and I've seen this community grow and wane, and it has to do with, the oil sector, and it has to do with the airport, and it has to do with a lot of other external things, the university. And I just don't know that funding these projects, most of them are athletic facilities, is going to have the attraction to have people come to our community. And that's why I'm kind of a data guy, and I'd like to know, why are people not coming here? We talk about our cost of living, but if you look at housing prices and rental prices on the West Coast, they're a lot higher than they are here, and they don't get permanent fund dividends, and they have to pay state income taxes. So I understand that we're looking for ways of, keeping people here, increasing our population, and making it a more vibrant community, but I guess I just don't understand, getting into the data, why are people leaving, and if this really addresses those things. The other specific question I had is, would this proposed sales tax be on top of the hotel tax and the rental car tax, which are also fairly significant? Thank you.
Yeah, real quick, so Anchorage Economic Development Corporation puts on a luncheon twice a year where all that data is presented, the economic outlook and forecast. And basically, we have the same birth rates, we have the same attrition rates from Anchorage. What we're not seeing is people moving back to Anchorage. And I can't speak exactly why it's been put out there that because of technology, people can work remotely and live anywhere. And so now we're competing with other cities who might live here versus Oklahoma City. Trying to think what else. projects, again, largely based on what we've seen work at Oklahoma City and some other areas to improve the quality of life, again, to attract people back. I must say there's projects I don't agree with, that I don't think, I scratch my head how that would attract me, but then when the survey data came in, I was pretty much opposite of the survey data. So I'm just willing to accept that. But again, the goal is to crowdsource this from the community, and again, have mechanisms where if this isn't right, we have other ways to bring in projects.
Hi, my name is Diana Rhodes. I'm the Programs Director for Anchorage Park Foundation. We wrote a letter of support for this package because we believe in the outdoor recreation economy, and we believe that parks and trails are a bright spot in Anchorage's economy. For 20 years, the Anchorage Park Foundation has advocated for parks and trails and supported the park bonds, advocating for park bonds that have passed 13 years in a row. The park bonds provide about $4 million for projects. The needs of the parks and recreation facilities are way more than that. And we organize a quarterly Trails Initiative meeting where we bring together people all across the city to share their ideas. And when we heard about Project Anchorage, we held multiple meetings to talk about it. And we got together picking out the best projects that we wanted to submit. And we submitted 2 projects with the idea that outdoor recreation could be improved if we had winter centers or 4-season centers that could facilitate larger events, to bring more people together, to host events. Keegan Randall was part of our team to submit project for for Kincaid Park, and then we also submitted one for Goose Lake Park. Both of those parks could host more people. They have facilities we would build a new facility at Kincaid to host larger events, and we would build a new facility or replace an existing facility that was damaged by the earthquake at Goose Lake. And so these are places that are along trails where we could work with the development community to build hotels alongside these existing trail facilities. You could have walk right outside your door and be skiing in the winter, running in the summer. We would have opportunity for more hotels that provide more opportunities for sports across the state to stay and have access to facilities. There's a lot of opportunity in the outdoor recreation economy across the state. It's nationally known that Alaska ORSA is the federal way that the federal government recognizes outdoor recreation. Alaska is number 3 in this industry. So we appreciate all the changes that you've made to this so far to address these issues. And we look forward to working with you to bring it to the voters. We can let voters decide. Thank you so much for your leadership in bringing this forward.
Thanks. I just want to quickly address a couple of questions that weren't answered. So first of them, to address sort of what the commuter population looks like from the valley to Anchorage. So roughly we're looking at approximately 32,000 residents who commute from the valley to Anchorage on a regular basis. And the only way that we capture any taxation from them now is if they get gas in the municipality, then we capture that, but there's no other way to capture any taxation from them. And then there was a question asked around bed tax and vehicle rental tax, and yes, this would be taxes on top of the existing taxes for those, and I just want to note that specifically with regard to the bed tax, the visitor industry has actually been one of the main champions of Project Anchorage, even though this would add some additional tax onto them.
I just had time to briefly glance at the proposed tax proposition, and I was looking and I thought, oh, I was going to ask about, because you're saying it's going to possibly reduce some of the property taxes, like the commercial and residential, and I would like, my thought was I wanted to propose, if you guys would think about proposing adding on to the commercial, because there's a lot of places that, commercial spaces that are empty and have been empty for years, and from what I understand, they get breaks for being empty, they get write-offs. And I think we should, the way to encourage that is like, you still own it, and we need that filled so that the businesses can be actually in there. And so they, if there's any way to say, hey, can we address the commercial tax on this proposal side, on the side of commercial tax? Does that make sense? Yeah. If it's empty for over a year, they should, you just increase their tax instead of giving them a write-off. Find a way to do that. Is that possible?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll just address quickly how this proposal looks at commercial and rental property and owner-occupied property, and then talk to your question specifically, sir. So right now, state law does not allow us to differentiate between any types of property. I think as Randy talked about, there is a law that a member of the House majority is working through to change that will allow municipalities to differentiate between different types of property. And so certainly if that law is passed and is either signed or goes through however long it takes for the governor not to veto it, then that's certainly something that I know many assembly members are going to pounce on that one very quickly. And then in terms of the tax for not using your lots, if it's a vacant lot that you're not using for a long time, that's certainly, I think, discussions that assembly members have had. What can we do to kick property owners in the rear to get them to actually develop their properties? And there's sort of the carrot and the stick kind of approach. And while that idea isn't going to be captured in this particular ordinance, I will tell you it is an ongoing discussion that the assembly has.
Also, Tom Atkinson, I live in Spinard. I don't necessarily oppose a sales tax or diversification of Anchorage's tax base. I lived for 25 years in the Kenai Peninsula Borough where we had a sales tax, property tax, and personal property tax on airplanes, boats, and so forth. But what I don't like about this proposal from what I've read is that the primary beneficiaries would be large commercial landowners, and that's regressive and it doesn't really help our housing situation. If you could figure out somehow where the proceeds of the sales tax went to help alleviate a homeless problem, then I'd be all over it. Because I think that's a big reason why working age families that you want to attract here aren't here. It's perhaps they would be attracted by more of the facilities that have been talked about for Project Anchorage, but they're also repelled if they come to take a look by what they see on the street corners and in front of Walmart and so forth, and that's the problem. So that's what I'd like to see that any money go to. But I don't really understand, perhaps you could explain to me, while our overall tax burden is low, the lack of diversification of our revenue sources poses a serious risk to our comprehensive fiscal picture. I don't understand what serious risk there is. But it seems to me we've been operating without a sales tax in Anchorage forever, and I don't see a serious risk. Thank you.
I'm not sure I can address the serious risk nature, but I guess that's on the housing and homelessness. That's one reason we added one of the housing projects, to try to build more housing, to make housing more affordable within Anchorage. And that was something that wasn't in the initial proposal that we've added.
comments. You know, the hotels and other commercial properties that are owned, that are operating in the city, they're owned by corporations or businesses that are not located in the city. The room taxes, you know, that'll bump that up to 15%. So of course the hotels and the owners aren't going to care because it's not going to be their expense. It's the visitor's expense. So that means our hotels will be taxed at 15% each room every single night, which seems a little bit onerous to me. But the concern is that if we give this, you know, all these hotels and all these commercial properties, this property tax relief, that money's not staying in Anchorage. So it really doesn't help Anchorage. It's like we're just giving them money. So that's one of my concerns. And in the ordinance, you also call out migration information. And this is just a comment. I'm kind of confused by what you're trying to tell us. It says from 2013 to 2023, 12,474 residents left, of which 18,314 are working age. I'm not sure what they're trying to say. It's like we have 12,000 leaving, but 18,000 of them are working age. So it's like, what's the scoop here? The other concern I have is that I didn't see any consideration for long-term nursing homes or long-term adult care products. When you are, or for hospice, when you are left caring for someone that has dementia, you are responsible for every single thing, including their meals, including their, you know, adult care products. And when they have to go to a nursing home, there's no consideration. I mean, it's just, you know, oh, it's just going to be like another hotel room. Each and every single day will be taxable. And it's like, you know, that's just not fair. I mean, I'm just like, oh, it's hideous to have to do that, but anyway. The other concern I had is that Oklahoma City, they don't use property taxes to pay for their core services. Their property taxes go to pay general obligation bonds. And they've had a sales tax in place for some time, so, you know, adding another 1% or 1 cent is probably not that big of a deal to them. And the other thing about Oklahoma City is, number one, it's on the road system. Their climate's a whole lot warmer than ours, and it just, you know, they probably have way more visitors than we do. I just am like, it needs more work, and I'm really not in favor of it at all. Thank you very much for listening. And thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, you're welcome, absolutely. So I'll try to keep the population first. What we're seeing based on the AEC information is our working age population is always left. You know, kids go off to college, they go to school for 8, but they're not coming back. And that's what that data is trying to show us. Is we have the same rate of loss as we always have had, but we're not seeing that influx. You know, our children are not returning home. With respect to corporations, a common theme, again, we looked at that on how we could carve them out, and we just can't. You know, and my hope is, again, you know, your Fred Meyers, your Walmarts, they invested in us in the past. And hopefully with this money, it won't be profit-taking, that they'll invest in us again, maybe increase wages. And again, if we had a mechanism, believe me, we'd probably pull it, but we don't have that mechanism. On the hotel taxes and so forth from the visitor community, we would still be below the national average. So they didn't feel that would have an impact. As high as it seems to us.
15%.
Yeah. As high as it seems to us, they feel that we would still be below the average.
Jeez.
What is the average?
I think it was around 18%, if I remember right. Nursing home, I can't recall, I know we excluded some medical exemptions in there, but that's one of the reasons we left it open for the assembly to change the exemptions. They can modify them. If we miss something, they can bring something forward. Because again, we're not gonna get this right. We didn't want to paint a box and put everyone into a box that we find ourselves trapped in. And that's why some things are written somewhat ambiguously. So you could modify them later, because we're not gonna get this 100% right.
Right, but you called out specifically child care products and child care people as exempt, and you bypassed adult care fees. And
And that's a very good point. I'll be the first to
They
admit
really
that,
are.
that sounds like a gap. It sounds like we missed something. And
Yeah.
it's probably because we had the child, the parents coming forward and really advocating for that, but honestly, I don't think anyone came forward to now about nursing homes. And what your argument sounds very reasonable to me.
It is.
Yeah, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts. First off, I'm an Alaska Native person, and reading through, you say maybe 20% would be out-of-state tourists, but then you're not sure how much would be for people across the state. We're talking about commuters from the valley, but I feel like a lot of people who also come to Anchorage are people from across the state, such as rural villages, Alaska Native folks, who the cost of living out there is so exorbitantly high, and so they come here to visit family, go to medical appointments, and or to even just get relief of things that they need to purchase to live their lives. And so I feel like this would cause a big impact on them. I know you're the Anchorage Assembly, but these are Alaska Native Indigenous people. I feel like it would have an adverse effect on them. I also feel, I don't know, I don't agree with the 2% towards property tax, 1% towards Parks and Rec, which Parks and Rec is my favorite TV show. So I do love our parks, but we have great parks, and we need to continue funding them. I just feel like there could be a better way. I don't feel like paying a sales tax is the answer personally. I do appreciate all the exemptions. I feel like maybe there's more needed, such as what about electric, phone, gas, utilities, things like these. So I'm very focused on the lower income folks, 80% for the poverty. I don't know, I want to make sure that it matches what's the level for people who are on public assistance, for example. I feel like that's probably more towards 60%, but I'm not 100% sure. So I definitely want to make that upgrade. So if this did come to fruition, and as with a lot of other people have said, I feel more comfortable. I want to support people, but I feel more comfortable if this would actually go towards helping the homeless, low income, public transport, things like that. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just go real briefly, and I'll just kind of make this general comment. Part of this project was not to, again, supplement general government, what our property taxes are paying for. It was meant to, again, invest in our community. And again, if I don't have anything right, so we'll have the avenues there to fix it later.
Awesome. My name is Catherine Hickman. I am a social worker, and I have a whole list of questions, but I'm going to try and talk really fast and move through all my thoughts. But starting off with my first question is, why is it that you think that lowering property tax will increase people coming to Alaska? Like a very simple, straightforward answer would be appreciated. It's also been said by several other people here that this looks like a price reduction for the bigger corporations and businesses, or the big families who own massive parts of Anchorage. I'm just curious how, in your minds, that translates to helping the average family decide to stay here in Alaska. In the past and I think you've actually kind of answered part of this, has reducing property tax lowered rent in the past? You mentioned in your statements that renters are already paying a hidden tax as kind of an argument for this reduction. However, as you stated earlier, you don't think that rent is going to go down. So I'm just curious if you think it will help, the ongoing rental problems. You mentioned earlier that when you had the proposals for the group projects, that lots of people came back and said, hey, we're really concerned about housing. Yet, when you have a list of 10 projects, you've got 3.5-ish that refer to housing, 6 that are very clearly for parks, and like Cal stated before me, I love parks. I'm gonna be outside in Alaska regardless of having a park. What I need though, and what other families need, is housing. So I would be really interested in considering either a heavier focus on what we the people have been saying that we need here in Anchorage. Just making sure that I'm hitting. Some things that I would be really curious about is if Project Anchorage, what would it do to either build more housing, lower rent, or fix older, broken, and unsafe houses? Um, You have a long list of exemptions. I do appreciate what you have included. I would echo my fellow community member who mentioned elder care. As I stated, I'm a social worker. Anchorage doesn't have a hospice home. That would be a great thing to have, that people could have a safe place to pass away in. We don't have that currently, and that's a big need for people. It is expensive to have nursing homes, elder care, PCAs. The list goes on and on. I would love to see some very detailed exemptions there. I'm also curious about exemptions for clothing. Clothing costs a lot for big families. That wasn't something that was listed, as well as exemptions for heating or housing, electricity, and you mentioned fossil fuel, like for cars. I wasn't sure if that included like heating for houses. So I think that's most of the stuff, and that's all of my time.
I'll try to be quick, realizing that we're taking time away from everyone else. So property tax, I think what considers for an average home in Anchorage, it should reduce property tax around $1,000. So you could maybe the argument makes housing a little bit more affordable, homeownership a little bit more affordable by reducing that. Our hope on renters, and again, it's hope that we have no mechanism to enforce this, is that it's going to allow the owner to stave off price increases a bit longer and not pass that through. Again, that's hoping that we don't have any mechanism there. And then on housing, we're trying to facilitate that but not compete in that space. So the municipality is not going to build houses because they're competing with private contractors. But the idea is to take places like the archive site and try to help develop the land to where we can build more housing. So what people may not realize is if you go to Anchorage Water and Waste and ask them what the biggest barrier to housing in Anchorage is the availability of water and sewer. And if you go to their website, you'll see a map that's a patchwork quilt, and there's places in Anchorage that don't have water and sewer access. And what that does is it limits what I can build on that property. It might go from an 8-plex down to 2 houses. So and they just don't have the money to do that. So maybe there'll be projects around that to help support housing more in the future.
Hello, my name is Chris Beck, and I guess I would just call myself somebody who's, as a private citizen and business person, interested in the future, specifically the economic future of Anchorage. And I have to start off by just saying thanks. If I was looking for a way to have a kind of a miserable time, it would be proposed a tax in Alaska, any place, under any situation. So, and I wholeheartedly support what you're trying to do. I know there's warts and imperfection, but the heart of my thinking is we just need more wealth in this community. I really like the question, I think it's the person who isn't here now, about what causes people to leave. We were a wealthier state 10 years ago. The average increment of salary was 15% of what it was in the lower 48. That's dropped down to like 5%. And as everybody's saying, we have so many needs in this community. You know, the list is endless. And we're not going to have the resources to meet all those needs unless there's just more money coming into town. And I wish we could list off a bunch of categories that would create that. But it's not going to be oil. It's not going to be fishing. It's probably not mining. Air cargo is maxed out. The one thing we do is, fortunately, something that's good for residents and good for visitors. We can invest in outdoor recreation and tourism. Try to get more people to spend money in town. And the list of projects leans that way. I have to stop and breathe, because that's the variable we can affect. And the one that I've pushed on most passionately is to try to take advantage of winter. We've had a funny winter, I know, but you know, we have a great majority of our visitors come in 4 months of summer. We have this beautiful winter. This is an exception. But winter is a huge attraction we're not taking advantage of. So if I was to think of a single action that could increase spending by visitors and make Anchorage a more fun place to be in winter, so most people wouldn't start dreading winter, would be trying to make it fun to be outside. And so the projects we've pushed are specifically aimed at that goal. And I think that, again, I really appreciate you folks giving a shot at this and doing all the things. I think exclusivity argument largely off the table. And so I think we're left with the question the voters ought to answer. Do we want to invest in ways that create more wealth? And the wealth then creates tax revenues for the city, it creates better jobs, it creates more opportunities for business. So, sorry, such a breathless delivery, but I appreciate what you're trying to do, and thanks for that.
No, thanks. And real quick, you did remind me of one thing. We're not, this is not going to, that's like, phrasing kind of weird, this is not going to revitalize Anchorage. The goal is we're going to plant the seeds that then will attract businesses and entrepreneurs that will then make this a tenfold increase to revitalize Anchorage.
Thank you. I'm the big, bad, evil landlord guy out there who's causing all the problems. So I have about 120 rental units around town. I'm born and raised here. I've been investing in real estate for 30 years. We do not want to jack rents. I'm telling you this as a landlord for longer than I know. It's so painful. Why? If my unit rents for $1,500 a month, and that's $50 a day, and their rent, because of property taxes, even a 3 to 5% increase because of inflation goes up 75. If they vacate and I'm stuck with a month where I got to fix it, it's a 30-day before I rent it out, I lost $1,500, that's 30 months. It's going to take me 3 years to recoup that. We don't look for ways to milk people. The math just doesn't make sense. Property taxes are a sales tax. It's just a forever sales tax. You build onto your house and you do something and they're like, gotcha, and you pay more, even if your income goes down. If you make less money, doesn't matter. You're going to pay more, but not because of your income, not because of what you do, nothing other than what the guy down the street may or may not have sold his house for. It is fundamentally the most unfair tax. To me, a sales tax isn't a perfect, I don't think, it's obvious I don't like taxes at all, but whatever, who does? But the point is that at least this way we're getting some people that are coming through town, they're contributing to it. I do not want to raise rents. They're so ridiculous compared to other markets where I own properties. It is so expensive to own or work, or if anything, God forbid, breaks on your property, how expensive it is. Our inventory, if you're wondering why so many of the apartment buildings are dilapidated and look bad, it's because landlords hold off increasing their rents for so long that they can't afford to make large capital improvements in them, so they don't. And because we've strangled supply, they don't have to, right? So how do we get this done? Go do it. Do what you keep doing. Go to a partial sales tax. Property taxes should only be on the land, but not on the improvements, because that is punishing people for investing in and it's punishing people who live in their houses for a long time and who are getting older and their income is diminishing. It's saying, well, too bad for you. And by the way, it doesn't matter what you can afford. The guy down the street sold his property, so we want more from you. Just fundamentally is wrong. I like what you're doing here. You're going to get a lot of flack for it. And I will tell you this, I can't guarantee rents will go down, but if I can avoid raising rents so I can keep long-term tenants and they can afford to continue without me having to say, sorry, but I can't afford to keep you in here, I got to jack up the rents, I'm perfectly fine doing that. But as long as property taxes keep going up and inflation keeps going up, then there's no way that I'm going to put it on the tenants, because when they're sink rents, someone needs to pay to do it, and they're not going to. Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Hunter Robertson. I've lived here my whole life. So like one of the focuses you guys are talking about is out-migration. And just pretty bluntly, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, man, I would love to live in Anchorage, but they don't have a sales tax. So that part to me is a little confusing. And then also like the math about it, I think you said there's the property owners would say maybe an average of $1,000 a year, but I don't know how much I average spend on products around the city or whatever, but let's say I spend $20,000 on my annual spending in town, then that's $600 that's going to be a tax. So I save $400, so $35 a month or roughly that. Again, I don't think that's going to make anybody move to Anchorage saying, I mean, I'm not going to complain about saving money, but $400 a year or whatever, I don't think that's the make or break situation. I think we got some bigger issues that, and again, I understand you guys on the school board, but growing up here, I went to Northwood Elementary, and now that's where my children go. I can see a drastic decrease in their education level. So I would say, one, our schools is a big problem on why families don't want to live here, is because have issues with drugs and alcohol and vagrants around the city, which understandable, they're in a bad situation at the time, but it seems like we are enabling their behavior. We don't have police officers, people are putting people away for being drunk around the town or high on drugs or fornicating or whatever the case may be. It doesn't seem like we want real solutions where the taxes could be nice. It could be nice to have a nice athletic facility, but it also seems contradictory when we just shut down Sullivan Arena for like 2 years when that's our #1 arena. We have the airline center now, which is nice as well, but it seems like we take one step in the right direction, take 1 or 2 back. So just don't really understand exactly how this is going to solve those issues.
Hi, I'm just coming from a school day. Usually for a Q&A, questions are asked, but so I will try to swing it towards questions. I'm also a part of the team that did the Girdwood submission, and that has just been an Anchorage art refugee, you could say, that spends time in Girdwood, and it's been such a delight to see a small community come together, and I would just love to see that more in the municipality. So my first question is for you two. What is the feedback you've heard on recent property assessment hikes that was mentioned with another speaker and the upcoming increase in taxes?
So feedback on the property assessment hikes. So we don't control that. So it's based on the assessor's office and based on comps. And everyone's seeing across the nation rapid increase in property prices. I think Girdwood, part of it was hit last year, but it was really hit hard this year. And what I encourage people to do is look at your property dollars, your tax dollars that are going out. That's going to give you a better picture than your appraised value and the mill rate. There's 2 moving targets that go up and down. So I guess one way to explain it, if everyone's property went up by 10% and the budget remained the same, you're going to pay the same amount of tax. Okay, so again, go look at the dollars you're actually paying. And that's going to give you a better picture of how your property taxes have fared over the years. And then truthfully, the only way to really reduce that is to build more houses, spread the base, or spend less, which is very difficult to do through an assembly or ASD as a group. Rabbit hole, I'm going for it.
And so the Assembly actually has a really great fact sheet that was done by our Legislative Services Office that talks about the correlation and sometimes lack of correlation between assessed value and mill rates and how that impacts, in the end, your total tax liability. So I would encourage folks, I think it's on the website. Okay, great. I would encourage folks to take a look at that on the website so that you can maybe learn a little bit more about that issue.
That was definitely worth the price of admission. Thank you so much. And I see the timer going. I'll just ask my last 2 questions. One is, where have you been delighted and inspired by a municipal project? For me, I'm thinking of trying to bring my children now to the swimming pools where I grew up having fun in, the public swimming pools, and they're no longer accessible. They're in shabby condition if you can actually get in. Many of them are closed. But then going to Wasilla and seeing their sales tax funded public pool, this amazing complex. So where have you been delighted by that? And the other one is, what do you think the moral of the Little Red Hen story is?
I'm sorry, we chewed up your time with our answers. So I think that's part of one of the reasons why we're setting their cap on this, is we want to see the projects work. If the projects don't work, this dies. And it does work, like Oklahoma City, it comes back in iterations, again, if the citizens support it. Little Red Hen, so that's the story of making the bread, participating in the making of the bread. Those that don't participate want to come and eat the bread. Hopefully, with this and Project Anchor, you have to have him tell the story, right? I wasn't there. But she went on and on about how great their 1% for Oklahoma City was, their MAPS projects. And here you would think someone's against it, working 3 jobs, 2 children, a single mom, and just how much it meant to their community, and they've done it for over 30 years.
Hi, Brandy Pennington, born and raised here in Anchorage. I have a family, and if I'm grimacing, it's because I tried to keep up with my children this weekend, and now my back hurts. So I just want to say thank you for this project and initiative. I support it fully. I just don't think that we need to publicly fund more recreational opportunities. That some of the ones that were mentioned through Project Anchorage's website, mostly due in part to the fact that the private sector can keep up with the pace and demand for entertainment in this community. It's just too expensive to do that. So for example, if you want to put a community center together with a swimming pool, you have to be a nonprofit. And there are additional administrative layers that just really aren't conducive of an individual developer saying, let me do this. And so to kind of piggyback too off some questions that were asked and then answers that you had, in my experience, and I have an extensive amount of experience with the Department of Development Services, which is the economic engine of Anchorage, is the biggest barrier to development in Anchorage is the price of the application. I looked at doing a community of 25 homes. Just the application itself was going to cost me at $40,000. So I have to buy this piece of property at 11% interest with 30% down, and then I have to pay the municipality, well, I have to pay a professional to write 2 different types of applications for me at the cost of 20 or 30 grand, and then pay a $40,000 application fee to the municipality to go through the public process to find out if it's like approved or if it's not. And if you don't get approved, then you still don't get your money back. So my recommendation is, if we're modeling after other similar cities, that we go in like Boulder or Reno. I personally have visited planning departments from 5 different communities in the United States. I'm a real estate person on my own accord. Like, we're going on vacation, I'm stopping by a planning department. And in Boulder, you go in, you pay this $500 application fee, you put your paperwork in, you get a little ticket, you're approved. You can move on with your development and building. Here, I'm 18 months. Who's that guy that was in for recreation? I'm all in recreation because the state ain't coming in to save us. So I put in for a campground, a $550 million project. 18 months later, everyone in the municipality is still ignoring me, and it's really frustrating. So I've gone from, hey, this community could have $550 million, and I will gladly give you 5% tax on that $550 million, and all of the house sales thereafter, right? We're talking about 1,000 homes, and I'm going to pay you a sales tax on each one of those homes out of my own accord. I'm a landlord. I don't like raising rent. I did the math this summer. If I would have just done market rate increases, I would have had lots of buildings paid off. That's not the financial position I'm in now, because I don't want to do that. If you want to talk about not raising rents, don't give out any more free money. When that COVID money came through and Alaska Housing decided that they were going to pay 2 years worth of rent, the market rates for the sale of a home or a rental property, and the rates went up 25%. Nobody listens. I'm trying. I appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you, and I'll just tack on, you probably know better than I do, but I remember a statistic that was 30 grand more to build in Anchorage versus the Valley.
Oh no, it's way more than that. Can I just say this real quick? So I looked at a 25-unit complex, and the developer said, if I do this in the Valley, I can start he will start for me tomorrow. We won't pay any fees to the Valley, right? That's like one driveway permit. And it's a $5 million project. Paved, landscaped, everything. If he does the same project for me in Anchorage, he's going to charge me $7.4 million as a convenience fee, and it's going to take 18 or more months. And and I didn't really believe him, but now that I'm a year or two into different projects and application approval, that's really where it's at. So I just want Anchorage to be like actually open for business and make it possible for everyday people, like all of us sitting here, to do something. Thank you.
Okay, after listening to her, I'll just say you. But anyways, I did come up here to say that I'm against it, and I'll let you know why. First it started because we have so many elders in here, and I'm one of them, even though I don't look like one. And I want to make sure that all of them are exempt. You know, they work their whole life getting to where they are, and you guys are seeking for revenue. I mean, that's what we're here for. You're taxing for revenue. So
So, if you are online and you're networking and you're seeing the lower 48s going through polar vortex, climate change, and up here in Alaska, we're doing pretty good. Nothing's happening, but we can pull in revenue with our agricultural, our farming. We could send things down there. They're looking for eggs. Do we have eggs? You know, things that we have, we can look for revenue to, you know, kind of give us relief. You know, people are paying taxes. I guess he was right about the breath. But give the people of Anchorage relief by helping us look for revenue as that. Or even if you decide the tax, maybe 50% of look for revenue elsewhere where we can provide something for the others downstate that are suffering. Because it shouldn't be the taxes paying the whole. That's where it all is. And good excuse for listening to me. Thank you. And thank you, elders, for speaking up. Appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been speaking. I know it takes a little courage to stand up in front of a group and go to the mic.
Coverage. So I support a sales tax. I think we need as much new revenue as we can grab for the city because we're desperate for it. We got so much stuff that's falling apart and things that need to be fixed, and it's nice to have new stuff too. But I'm not quite sure I support it in the form it's in. I would much rather we have a sales tax and not rebate anything to property tax. But if you need to do that to make this thing happen, well then, that's fine. But listening here tonight, I heard we're still unclear whether it's 1/3, 2/3, or 50-50. I heard that there's still the potential that Senator Gray may come through with something at the state end that allows us to just exempt, or just give a property tax break to residential rather than commercial. I hear that you still haven't figured out how to work the exemption for low income. And you're going to leave that up to someone in the future to figure out, well, that's not really right. And I hear we're going to have a special election. Elections cost $500,000 here. So what's the rush? Why don't we just get these 4 things I just talked out, figured out, and push this to the next April election in April 2026, and make sure we get it right before we put it to the voters? Because if we put it to the voters and it's wrong and it gets turned down, we'll never bring it up again. We've done that in the past. We've brought sales tax up to the voters. They get shot down, and then the next time you bring it up, they say, well, it never passed before. So the last thing we want to do is bring a poorly put together sales tax. And I know you've been working on this for that whole long period of time, but so what? If you're not there yet, you're not there yet. So I'd really like you to, take a little pause on this. We don't need to move fast on this, I don't believe. We've been without it for a while, and it's better to get it a little bit delayed than to not get it at all.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. With regard to the bill that Representative Gray is moving through Juneau, that bill will either pass or not pass, but it's on its own independent trajectory from Project Anchorage. So Project Anchorage doesn't have to wait for that bill to get passed. And I'm at a point where I don't want to wait for action from the state to do things. I don't want to wait for action from the feds to do things. Let's act and then have the state follow our lead. So my hope is that Representative Gray's bill will pass, and then the Assembly will take action from there through municipal code, separate from everything in Project Anchorage, to implement Representative Gray's bill. So it's
You're talking prior to it going to the voters.
It can happen prior, it can happen after. They're two distinct and separate things. Project Anchorage, and then the way that we treat property tax exemptions. Two distinct things. And then on amendments, so I think as I talked about earlier, the amendment package is going to be coming out March 14th. It's, like it or not, folks, it's just part of the legislative process. Up until the day we vote, Assembly members can bring forward amendments. And sometimes that's consternating to folks, but it is just the way that it works. What I'm hoping to do, and what I've encouraged my colleagues to do, is to get everything done by the 14th, so that we have a few days to go through all of the amendments, and then on the 18th, we will decide what amendments we want to incorporate or not. But that 50-50 amendment will be one of the amendments that folks will see on the 14th. With regard to taxes, and just generally speaking, how taxes are created, I have a fair amount of experience in this, having worked and been one of the prime sponsors of the alcohol tax. And I've gone through the alcohol tax before it got on the ballot and then after it got on the ballot. Doesn't matter the tax, the marijuana tax, the alcohol tax. The way that it works is you build a framework and then you send it to the voters, and the voters get to decide yes or no. And then after the voters decide yes or no, then you use that framework and you finish building it. There is no tax ever in the history of Anchorage that has been built 100% before it went to the voters. That's just not how it works. And then, I'll leave it.
I was gonna say, like Oklahoma City, I think the first time it passed it was like one page. Granted, they had tax already, so a lot of people could just take it out. And then several people alluded to it. You know, the cold hard truth of all this is we have to get this to pass the assembly and ideally pass the voters. So you can all take your magic wand out and say, well, if I was king, I would do this. And we did that. And then we got told, well, that's not gonna make it past the assembly. Well, that's not gonna make it past voters. So it's this needle you're trying to thread. And in a way, one of the ways I look at it is I want to see this successful. And success to me is in 7 years when this is ready to expire, you are begging to have it reinstituted. That's success. The worst thing, honestly, is thank God this thing's ending. I can't wait for it to end. That means we completely failed. We did not earn your trust back. And we need to earn your trust in order for this to be successful.
I have one last question, if I could, is that I haven't really gotten a clear answer on whether online sales are taxed also.
I thought I included that in one of the slides, but maybe I didn't. So yes, there is one of the sections in the ordinance, so the implementation part, that talks about the Alaska Online Retailers, which is basically, it's how we implement the tax for online sales. So yes, assuming the voters approve this, we will be part of that, and online sales will be taxed.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tasha. I'm a Mountain View resident, and I have been having this tax conversation, I feel like, for a decade. I'm not in favor of a sales tax. I also am not in favor of property tax relief. I'm a property owner, and I just feel like if we want to make sure that our government is running, we need to have a set way of funding our government. And outside of that, anything above the tax cap, I really think, I don't like the regressivity of a sales tax, but I do think that everyone needs to have skin in the game. And if you're a renter, it would be nice if we broke out what rent looks like. Like, this is your part of the property tax, this goes to your utilities. And some of that I think people get, but I also think that sometimes we don't take care of our community as well as we could because we don't see how we as individuals are investing in it. And I would like to see us really look at how we can diversify the revenue for the city of Anchorage that's not a sales tax, or at least this type. I think that we have a lot of, I don't want to say problems in the community, but things that could be better. And living in Mountain View, I've seen the homeless situation firsthand for the last 20 years. From living in a building where I was renting, where people would sleep on the stairs, in the laundry room, try to break into my apartment. And sometimes I would call for assistance from public safety, and sometimes they would show up and sometimes they wouldn't. So I learned to navigate and communicate with our unhoused population. Those are my neighbors. I want to see them be safe and clean and have a nice environment. But I also know it deters people from going to where there is housing available. And so I would love to have us have capital investments, some great projects, some new investment, but I really want to see us focus on reinvesting in parts of our communities that we've allowed to deteriorate. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I appreciate all the comments. I believe Claire has passed out feedback forms.
Yeah, can you pull up the QR code?
All right. Can you hear me? Okay, wonderful. All right, folks. So thank you so much for your thoughtful feedback. Took us a lot of notes, so we'll definitely be looking over that. So there is, for folks interested, a feedback form. There's a paper copy, which I think was passed around. And if you want to do the phone version, this will get you that, so just scan that. And please give that to either Claire, myself, or Randy. And I think we had wanted to, so just to highlight again for folks, feel free to take any of the documents that are out on the table. And just a reminder, there's another town hall on Saturday. If you want to subject yourself to this again, feel free to. And then there is the final public hearing on March 18th, and I already talked about the different ways, email, phone, in person, that you guys can participate in that. Would love to have you guys engage. All right, anything to close?
Yeah, no, I'll just reiterate, I really appreciate you spending your Wednesday night with us and giving us your feedback. I wish I had a list of all the modifications that were made based on feedback we received from everyone. So we are listening. We want to show that we're listening. Some things we hear you and we won't change. Some things we hear you and we will change. And we're, again, trying to bring forward a solution that hopefully the majority of the residents agree with. And hopefully it's a solution that will have impact and have the desired outcomes that we've seen other communities like Oklahoma City. And I urge you to go look at their success story, their case history, and decide for yourselves if that'll work for us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.